I'm Bob. I like coffee. I also like to tell stories. So, here at the Bobcast Coffee, it's time for a coffee break. So, take a coffee break with me and pour yourself a cup of your favorite Joe. By the time you're done with your coffee, you'll know something about me you really didn't need to know. But you'll have fun learning it. Just remember, my stories are true. For the most part. And welcome back to another episode of Bobcast Coffee. I hope you have your good cup of Joe with you. Today we're going to do a continuation of our last episode. Episode 67 was all about my Uncle Bob. And today we're going to continue with a few more stories from Uncle Bob. I believe we're going to call these What Bobs Do. I don't know if it's in our name or in our nature, but we tend to make the most exciting and not best decisions in our world. So let's go on and see what Uncle Bob has to say today. All right. So you were in the military during some very unique times.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know that unique things have happened to you during that. I just want to know, first question, what was the most weird or significant thing that ever happened to you in the military?
Well, I already talked about the T-41, so I'm going to go back to my tanker days, and I was a brand new navigator on a KC-135, and that a KC-135, if you don't know, is basically a Boeing 707 that hauled fuel for other airplanes, and so I didn't know a whole lot about systems and stuff like that. I knew how to navigate, but that was about it. And one day, we had been called out to the airplane to do a pre-start check, and there's four people on a KC-135. You got a pilot, a co-pilot, a navigator, and a boom operator. And the boom operator is the guy that plugs in the other airplanes. And so I'm standing outside because I don't have anything to do up. There's no navigating, but the other pilots are up there, and I don't know where the boom operator was. He was somewhere. So I crawled up into the nose wheel compartment, and it was huge. I mean, I could stand up and still reach my hands up and not be able to touch the top of it was a big thing. And I was looking around, there was pipes, there was wires. It was fascinating to me to see all the stuff that made that gear come up. Well, I heard this hydraulic pump running, and I'm thinking, what's that noise? Because it was making quite a bit of noise, like a pump. And so I thought, well, I better step out of here, because these big clamshell doors were down here by almost on my waist. And I bent down to get out. And as soon as I did, those doors came up, and the hydraulic pressure was 3,000 PSI to close those doors. That was my first weird experience, because I could have been cut in half right then and there.
How'd you
and
get out of that?
Well, how did I get out of it?
Yeah.
Well, when I got down and the doors closed, I wiped my brow saying, thank God I got out of that thing just in time. And so I learned a good lesson right then. Don't get into anything that you don't know what the heck you're doing. And I guess during after we came back, the war, like I say, the war was winding down, and I was still navigating KC-135s, and we used to go up to Alaska a lot and fly missions out of Alaska, refueling basically spy planes that would fly over to Russia. We didn't go over to Russia, but they did. And we would fly these planes we would refuel these planes that took a lot of fuel. So when they would gas us up at Eielson Air Force Base, which is in Fairbanks, Alaska, and the runway was icy, snowy, and the way that they fueled KC-135s is they had separate tanks. It wasn't like one giant tank. There was like 3 in one wing, 3 in the other wing, 3 in the fuselage, and they were all under, you didn't see them. They were under the floor. And they could use the top of the floor for cargo. Well, anyway, what happened was they refueled that airplane wrong. They put the fuel that was supposed to be in the nose area in the back, and they put the fuel that was supposed to be in the back in the nose. And it's all calculated where you have to figure out, actually this is a co-pilot job, you figure out what your CG is, your center of gravity. And that determines a lot of settings on the trim. Well, the co-pilot didn't catch it because he thought that the boom operator who read off from a sheet of paper the fuel load, and he thought that fuel load was right, and that he was just reading it wrong. He gave him that one instead of this one. Yeah. So we go out to the runway to take off, and we start down the runway, and there's several checks that have to be made, like V1 you've heard of, and V2 and rotate and all that. Well, we got to V1, and the pilot, I'm sitting in the back, I'm the navigator, he pulls back on the stick all the way. And the airplane doesn't do anything except still speeding up on the ground. Well, thank God, Eielson had like a 13,000-foot runway, a really long runway. And we could start to see the end of the runway, or I could, because I could look out the window and see, hey, look, this ain't good. And the pilot was saying something to the effect like, what is wrong? Because we'd done past rotation speed. So he started trimming the airplane with electric trim on it. And he was trimming the tail. And the tail has quite a bit of up and down motion as far as trim goes. And he trimmed that airplane full nose up. And just as we were breaking ground, which we did get off the ground, we made it in the air. Of course, he said, what in the heck is wrong? So we started trying to reevaluate what was going wrong. And we had to make a big U-turn. And I know you know what Denali, now called Mount McKinley, sets real close to Eielson. Well, the weather was bad, like I say, wintertime, and we never got out of the clouds. But everybody on that plane was concerned about what went wrong. Why did we almost crash at the end of the runway? Well, when we made the U-turn, we were climbing up, and so I started doing my navigating thing. And I realized that we were below the mountaintop, and we flew right by the mountain, Mount McKinley. That was the second thing that almost got me killed.
It doesn't matter if the mountain hits you or you hit the mountain. It's going to be bad.
Trust me.
For you.
Now, there was one thing that I did was real smart. I never told the pilot that we almost hit the mountain. I figured that was not good for my career. So that was between me and God, But I had several near misses with other airplanes. We used to do dogfights in the F-4, and it was just a free-for-all, and we weren't really that great at flying dogfight missions. So a lot of times I would see an airplane come within just feet of me. Maybe from a different heading or up, straight up or down or whatever. So anyway, there was lots of those things. And now when I flew civilians for Bell South, other than maybe, a gear warning light not illuminating and something, I flew the Speaker of the House to Ohio State University from Washington. and the speaker always travels with security. So there was 2 guys on board that they told us were going to be armed, have guns. Well, we came into whatever town the Ohio State is in, and an airplane on the ground didn't get off the runway in time, or maybe didn't take off on time. But anyway, they told us to go around. We were on short final, go around. So I turned around to the speaker and I said, we're going to have to go around. There's an airplane on the runway and we can't land. Well, that was no big deal. It happened fairly regularly. So we go out to get in the pattern again, and they say, an airplane just called in declaring an emergency. He's going to take priority over you. Could you go around again? I turned around. Of course, they're all sitting back there and they're getting a little nervous because as we fly over the airport, I can see the ramp and all the dignitaries are out there to meet the Speaker of the House. And they're all looking up, and here for the second time, we're going around. Well, it just so happens that the guy who declared an emergency didn't get off the runway in time. We went around 3 times. I turned around and I said, them sumbitches is going to pull a gun on me. They're going to say something. They're going to say something to the tune, you either get this airplane on the ground or you're dead or you're going to jail or whatever. That was the most funny incident that happened, but we made it. Okay, next question.
I'm trying to think of, there were some stories that I heard, I remember as a kid, and I don't know how factual they are because they're, so old memories.
Mm-hmm.
You got in trouble in Germany flying Phantoms?
Not Germany. I got in trouble in Birmingham flying F4s in Birmingham. And this is what I'm thinking you might be thinking of it. They had a deal one day on, I think it was a Saturday, that they were going to let the wives go up in the tanker and fly. So they would they would stop, get those wives off, get another set of wives on. And the deal was that the husbands were going to be flying F4s, come up and get fuel. And the wives could look out the window in the back and take pictures of their husbands getting fuel off of a KC-135. Well, the people in the KC-135 would be changing out. They weren't always the same people. Well, it was Nancy's turn to get in the boom pod and watch me come in and take fuel. Well, when it was over, it was only about a 5-minute refueling. When it was over, I pulled off to the wing of the KC-135s, and I lit the afterburners and went straight and did several rolls well, it's damned if it wasn't the squadron commander watching back there in the boom pod at the same time that Nancy was back there. Of course, nobody told me. They grounded me for 30 days.
I don't know. Almost sounds like it might have been worth it.
It was worth it. It was worth it. I had no hard feelings. I just, it was kind of embarrassing. But ask me if I would have done it again, probably, yeah. That was the kind of, the National Guard was made up of a bunch of misfits. They didn't make it in the regular Air Force because they couldn't take the regimentation, like that. So all of us were misfits in some degree or other, but we're kind of like F Troop or MASH or whatever military thing you can think of. But anyway, that was a fun thing. Okay, next. I see I only got 9 minutes here. It says my call is going to end in 9 minutes.
Yep, I got that too.
Okay.
So
let's see if we wrap this up.
Well, I'm trying to think if you were in Germany in the 80s?
70s.
70s.
From 72 to 74.
So you were there during the
Uh,
Cold War.
oh yeah, yeah. That was one of our main jobs. Was if we had a job to do, we would go and fly the border between East and West Germany, and because they wanted to know if there were amassing troops for an invasion and stuff like that. So it was a pretty important job when we weren't just screwing around. But yeah, I flew. I went to the Berlin Wall. I saw the Russians. I saw the East Germans. It was pretty spectacular. But there was what they call the Four Powers Agreement. And what the Four Powers Agreement was, that any military person would have access to the whole of Berlin, actually to Germany, but to the Berlin. So when I went to Berlin, I had to wear a uniform, and I would go and just walk around. They couldn't stop me. They couldn't check me because I was in uniform. Well, we were doing a tour, so we hired some guy to drive us around, and I went with another fella and our wives, and we ended up at a Russian cemetery. It was a beautiful thing. It was very patriot. The Russians are big in colossal statues and stuff like that. They had all that stuff, but at the end of this cemetery, they had a rotunda, a round thing that had tiles, the little tiles where you can make artwork out of tile. Mm-hmm. They had this, and it showed life in Russia, farming, manufacturing, military, all the things that represented the great things about the Soviet Union. And it just so happened there was nobody in that building, nobody in there. So the four of us walked in, and we're walking around the thing, looking at all the what's decorating in there. And a bus pulls up outside. And there must have been 50 Russian civilians who had been on a tour, and they were going to drop those 50 people off to go into that thing. And so I could see them getting off the bus with their tour guide, and they come in, they're speaking Russian. And of course, the first thing they noticed is two American soldiers in uniform walking around in there, and they probably in their whole life had never seen an American soldier, never. They were fascinated by it. But what was funny about it was that if we were to look at them, they would look away. In other words, they wouldn't make eye contact. They didn't want to. They were afraid of us. we were, but they were fascinated by us at the same time. Well, as it turned out, one lady had enough guts to all of them had cameras. You know how the Japanese walk around the camera. All of them had cameras. This one lady held up a camera and pointed to me and the other guy, implying, "I'd like to take your picture." I said, "Come on, we're on one side of the room and they're all at the other side." Well, this lady comes over and takes our picture. And when she did that, everybody in that crowd, all 50 of them with cameras, they wanted a picture of us also. Not only did they want a picture of us, they wanted a picture of them standing next to us, maybe shaking hands or smiling or whatever, so that they could take it back home to wherever, Vladivostok or whatever, and show their friends that they had this encounter with a soldier. And here we got proof. So I figure that somewhere in Moscow or somewhere else, there's a picture of me hanging on the wall of several houses.
the Americans who invaded the.
Yep. And this was right in the heart of the Cold War. I mean, it was a tense situation. I mean, it wasn't tense, but it was very interesting time. And now, next question. We got 4 minutes.
I'm going to wrap it up. I would love to do this again.
Well, Well, if we do it again, let me skip over all the BS about how I became a pilot, and maybe I can talk about some of the aerodynamics of flying, because we had to study that in the schools, to what makes an airplane fly, what makes it go, all that kind of stuff. So it's quite interesting. And anybody that's watching this video that would like to know, why does an airplane have flaps? Why does it have?
I want to know how does a Phantom stay in the air? Because it simply doesn't look like it should be able to.
Well, there was an old saying that the Phantom, and this is a fact, the Phantom was the last airplane that was built and designed before computers. Nowadays, with computers, they pretty much know how that airplane's going to fly.
Yeah.
The Phantom was built so strong, so it was so massive and heavy that all they said, look, to make this thing fly, we got to put some really big motors on it. So they put two giant J79 jet engines on it, and it was overkill, but it made for a lot of fun because it would fly Mach 2.2. So it would get up and go. But,
So I want to thank you. Thank you very much. This will be my sign off.
I think I may have to go get me a cup of coffee.
Cup of coffee.
I like your mug.
My Texas mug.
Yeah, I like that.
And a quick note, please remember, if you're enjoying any of these stories, please hit the like button. Also, you can subscribe, drop us a note, hit any of those buttons out there that you like to hit, and have a great day.